Hello everyone, and welcome to my UDK tutorial series. In this first episode, I'm going to be going over the movement as well as the GUI in UDK. And it'll kind of be the basics of the GUI. It won't be like the extreme specifics of every button. And to be honest, I just want to go ahead and say this now. I don't know what every single button and option does because I don't use everything in the editor. And I'll get to some of that as we go along, but I just wanted to kind of go ahead and say that now, that I don't know what every single button does. I know what most of them do, but not every one. So, do bear with me if I say I don't know what this does, because I don't use everything in the UDK editor, because it's such an expansive engine. Anyway, if you've opened up the UDK engine for the first time, which likely if you're watching this tutorial you have, then you'll have this screen up here. And I do recommend checking some, the forums and the video tutorials and the documentation page out, especially these video tutorials. They have some very helpful stuff for beginners. The 3D Buzz tutorials in particular were very helpful to me, though they are pretty old, like 2006, 2005, kind of old. So do keep that in mind when watching those. But, I'm going to go ahead and exit this real quick. Now, the content browser. This I'm going to cover in a separate tutorial because it's not really expansive that much, but it's got a lot to it, sort of. And you got all this stuff up here. So that's kind of in its own little thing. Just for right now, know that this is where you go to get stuff for your level. Sort of. Like, this kind of holds everything that you could use in your level visually. If, like, textures and objects and things, and sounds as well in some cases. So that may be kind of confusing, but again, I'll have a separate tutorial on that. Alright, now at this point you could either have this screen or this screen. Depending on what it is, you kind of want to hit this button on whichever screen you want to go to. There's like this maximize button right here. So just go ahead and hit that, and then, if you're in this big screen, you can just hit it right there, and you can minimize it. So I'm going to leave it in the big screen for now. So if you want to go ahead and do that, you can kind of see what we've got here. And I'm going to go cover movement, and then we're going to kind of go through the GUI from top here, and then down each section, down here, and then down to the bottom, and we'll be done. So, first off, for movement, you have a variety of movement options. You have the WASD keys, which can only be used when holding down the right mouse button, just so you know. So you hold down the right mouse button, and then you can move with the WASD keys, or the arrow keys, if you wish to, if you're left-handed. I'm right-handed, so I use the WASD keys. Now, one thing about the way this engine is set up is that it's made so that you can use the entire editor itself without actually having to have a keyboard, because there's drop-down menus and stuff, and you can move around by just using the mouse. So, and if you didn't want to do this whole like first-person shooter flying around style thing that we have going here, you can hold down the left mouse button and move it forward and back. Right mouse button to kind of, pan around like you would normally do, and then you can zoom out with the middle mouse button. And if you hold the left and right mouse button together, which is kind of weird, but you can do this. So you don't technically have to use a keyboard to move around, but it's doing this and then like this is kind of much more difficult than just this, So, there's that. Now, you have to use the keyboard when you're doing like moving around if you're testing your game. So, there's that. But anyway, that's that's pretty much your movement. There's really not much else to it than that. And there's a couple like different camera movement options when moving objects. I don't know what all the hotkeys are. In every video I'm going to leave a link in the description to, like a list of all the hotkeys in UDK, so you can check that out if you want to get more information on hotkeys. And some of the things, I'll point out a few of them that I use, but I'm not going to be able to point out all of them. Anyway, as for the menus, start with File up here, of course. And this is your typical stuff that you would find in a file menu. New level open, save current level. Little bit different, obviously, but it's your typical, file type things. And your switch renderer, for right now, if you're just like following these tutorials, this isn't really going to matter. Though I've had less problems with DirectX 9 than I have with DirectX 11, and I'll get into those specifically as we come across some of that stuff. One important thing is doing fractured meshes. I'm not going to get into that right now, but DirectX 9 works much better with fractured meshes than DirectX 11. So that's up to you what you want to use, really. I was using DirectX 11 for a long time, but like I said, the fractured meshes kind of was having issues with. You will need to make sure you restart the editor once you do change. So keep that in mind if you're working on stuff. Go ahead and save everything, switch it, and then restart. Don't restart expecting it to have switched. You have to go and manually click it. If I do, it'll ask me, if I want to restart, and if I click no, then it'll be changed. It'll switch over after I've already selected it. Anyway, at least it should be. But you just want to make sure you kind of go ahead and do it, restart after you've clicked it. Anyway, importing, exporting, favorites, recent, typical stuff, and you can exit here. You'll notice I have no exit menu. I will get into why that is in a moment. You'll see why. I did that purposely just for recording purposes. Not, I don't typically use it like this, but anyway. Edit, undo, redo, of course, and a lot of stuff there is a button for as well, like these three things. So I'll explain what these three things are once I get to the button, because a button is easier to explain with. Copy, paste, which you can do with this with the right mouse button click window. And I'll get more into that, but you have copy, paste there as well, and you have your your typical hotkeys for that. Delete, is something which you can just hit the delete key. Note that is the delete. That is the delete key that's not on the number pad. So it's like the one that's below insert and to the right of the slash key if you're looking at the keyboard. Select none, all. There's not for all of these, but there are a few buttons for stuff like this. Find actors essentially allows you to search for things with a bunch of different parameters. That's, self-explanatory. And once you do find something, you can actually click the properties window from here. If you double-click it or click the go-to menu, you can, go to the object and see it and various things of that nature. And all that, invert selection, select by property, select all, select build to brush. That's all self-explanatory, and just basically selecting the different objects that you want. So should be able to figure that out, okay? View. Now I know I'm skipping all the way to the bottom, but I want to go ahead and explain this. I have this on full screen. If I undo full screen, you'll see I now have my taskbar at the bottom and the the thing in the actual Windows menu. But for the sake of recording this, it just looks a little nicer if I don't have it in full screen, because you can kind of see some of the text a little better because it's just slightly bigger. So I'm just leaving it in full screen for recording. But that's that. It really doesn't do too much. And just personally, I think it's a little more trouble than it's worth. But it's an option that you can do if you like it like that. So there's that. Now, all this other stuff, browser windows, you have your different things. You can get the content browser, and the content browser actually has a lot of this stuff in it. So it has actor classes, which is there. It's got the levels thing, which is right there. It's got your scene layers, documentations at the bottom. Now it has these other couple of things, and to be honest, I don't know what they are. I'm not gonna jump around that fact. I don't use this like at all. I don't use this little context window here. I don't know what really any of this stuff is, and I don't use like a lot of the stats stuff. Though if you're really interested, essentially, if I had to guess, I mean, it would just kind of show stats of different textures and stuff, I suppose. But again, I've never really used these things right here because I'm not. I just haven't used them. And there may be a different way to get to this, but like this, a lot of the time I don't ever use these context windows anyway. I just click the buttons. So now actor properties, I always just hit F4 because it's so much quicker than clicking on an object and clicking actor properties. Now this will only work if you actually have an object selected. So if I went and did select none, if I click actor properties now, nothing is going to come up. So you can still click it, but nothing's going to come up. And again, no surface selected for surface properties. Now, do note surface properties will only work with CSG brushes, which I'm talking about CSG brushes next episode. So you'll see what I mean there, but that only works with like certain types of things. If I click this here, I can do surface properties, but it's saying there's no surface selected even though I have an object selected. So keep that in mind. World properties, of course, has no hotkey thing, and this is kind of one good way to get to this. This has a lot of good stuff in it. Just make this a little bigger. Yeah, this has a lot of good stuff in it for different things. Naming the map and applying like default things. Your some default settings if you're going to need like some default settings. A lot of just random settings stuff for the world, which is useful. And I'll get into this kind of stuff later on. Drag grid, rotation grid, and scale grid I will cover when we get down here because that's what all that is right down there. As again, autosave, detail mode of course is useful if you are encountering a bit of lag. I have not really seen too much of a difference, and I can click it here and you're really not going to see a major difference. There's a slight one if you like really pay attention, but it's not well, I mean I can barely see anything here. There's not much you can see in this example. If you have a lot of stuff going on, it may kind of switch some of the textures to a lower level of detail, and I found it to help a little bit whenever I'm lagging a lot. Though normally I would just install more RAM, and it would help it, because this is a very RAM intensive program. So keep that in mind that is there though, that you can switch it if need be. Emulate mobile features I've never used because I've never needed to do mobile features, so I'm not even going to try to show you how that works. I would assume you'd need a mobile phone hooked into it though. So if you're making apps, there's your button. And all this stuff is basically just personalized kind of stuff, So I'm not going to name off what each and every one of these things do, but it's just kind of personalizing, kind of how you want it to look and stuff. So now the new floating viewport. That is useful. And again, there's a button for this. But if you wanted to like customize it a little better, you could, go here, I guess. Though you can still end up getting the same thing with the other way of doing it. But I'll cover this when we get to the button also, because it'll be a little easier to show then. But the viewport configuration is different because you can do. I have it on 2x2 split, so let me show that. So I have 2x2, and I will cover these individual windows as well. Just give me a minute. But we have a 2x2 split now. So now if I go to 1x2 split, it's 1x2. Self-explanatory. And we do vertical and a horizontal split. Now you can also drag this, wherever you want. So, it's very, the viewport window itself is very customizable to how you want. I personally just prefer the good old 2x2 split. And, I've worked with several of the others, but I just kind of fall back to this one because I end up using all of these windows for stuff. But, you can customize, like each, you can customize this one and then the difference between this one, which will actually drag these two as a whole, so remember that. So you can't like adjust each individual window, but you can kind of adjust them as a whole. And if I just click back on that, it resets it. So there you go. So just remember, you have a lot of settings that UDK can use to be able to kind of make things a little more personalized for you working with the program. And a lot of that stuff is really easy to just change for a different person. Like you saw, all you have to really do if you want to reset this is just click it again. So if you have it like you like it and someone else is coming along, you just re-hit that button and it sets it back and they can change it however they want. So, oh, I did forget these two. My bad. There are buttons for these. So I'm gonna just show you. It opens. I can just click this. Now I can't. Now it says there's no Unreal Matinee sequences yet. And if I were to go into all the trouble, it's not really that much trouble. But if I were going to, setting up a matinee sequence, then there would be more questions asked than answers given. So I'm going to leave that for a separate tutorial because it's complicated. Matinee is used for doing cinematics in game, so you can imagine it gets complicated. And then Kismet again, that's for like in-game scripting, and I can go ahead and open it up. And there's not really much here. But now there is. So I can just, now it gets complicated when I start adding stuff in. This is also going to be on its own tutorial, which will kind of tie into the matinee stuff as well. But those buttons are there and there. Alright, brush. I don't ever use the brush thing right here. I use buttons. There are buttons for these, and it's so much easier. Import and export, you actually have to click here. But the rest of this, there's a button for. And it's just so much easier to use the button. It really is. Build. That is, pretty much all of this is a button as well. Those are right over there. And the brush buttons are down here. And there. They're all over. It's a good chunk of the thing. Play and editor, you got your different options here for different, like playing it on things. So you can do iOS device, your mobile previewer, and of course on your PC. Now play and active viewport actually, well no, that's not what I want. In editor, there we go. No, it's not working right. Okay. That you guys see that's actually not wanting to work, and that's not my fault. That's supposed to do something differently, and I'll show you how that works when we get to the button. Like I said, there's a lot of buttons to do the exact same thing as a context menu. But that's just people sometimes like menus. Some people work with menus, so that's why they added it like that. Tools. The only thing I use out of here is the new terrain button. And I'm not going to get into that because terrain menu can be complicated. So that can, this can get complicated. I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole separate tutorial in and of itself. And I should delete this before it starts lagging. Okay. But other than that, you can run a check map. Now, which that will actually automatically happen every time you build a level. And I'll explain that a little bit in a couple minutes, and you'll understand it more once we actually get into CSG, which will be the second tutorial. But you can run another map check instead of the default one at the building of the level. Yeah, the building of the level. You can just run another one there if you feel like you need to. And of course, you can do regenerating and generating in various tool like thingy-majiggers and stuff. Like I said, I really only use this right here. And maybe this every now and then. though I really don't use that often because I just look at my errors every time I build, which you'll be building quite often. And this is all, of course, all your preference stuff. More personalization from here, more personalization things. So, of course, I have it like I like it. But you can change things. And your camera controls you can actually use. You got some interesting options for that. So that's that. You can change up however you want. And your help, so you can show stuff there if you want to do that. And things and stuff. Alright, now before we start getting into all the other buttons, I want to go ahead and cover these windows real quick. I already showed you how to move about, in here. But these are a little bit different. Essentially, you kind of just hold the left mouse button and drag around. And you can kind of move around. And this is called an orthographic view. The other thing is a perspective view. And it kind of tells you what it is from the little P thing up there. I meant to be using that little control hit to show the mouse cursor thing. I'll try to remember that throughout this tutorial. Anyway, so you can see, this says this is S, and that stands for side view. So we're looking at the side view of the map right now, and orthographic view. And just dragging it around like here, you've got all the grid points and everything, and you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and zoom out. And one thing it does do, which is different than in the perspective viewport, if I zoom in here, it zooms in to the center of the screen, depending on how I have my screen positioned. So if I aim my cursor down here, it's not going to zoom there. It's going to zoom to the center of the screen, which is, wherever the center of the screen is. So wherever I position this is where it's going to start zooming in or zooming out from. In this case, it actually zooms to where your cursor is. So there is a bit of a difference there. So if I put my cursor here, it'll zoom there. If I put my cursor over here, it'll start zooming that way. So keep that in mind when you're working on those two, because sometimes it can get a little confusing if you're jumping back and forth between them very quickly. But you'll kind of remind yourself if you're zooming and all of a sudden you zoom way out here, you can kind of remember pretty quick. Right mouse button you can also use to drag around as well as the left mouse button, of course. So there's that. Now let's see. That's kind of like the basics of these windows, really. And I'm going to talk about this whenever we get to it. So I want to cover this top menu first. So first things first is we have create new level. Brings up this little template thing here, and you can just do your blank map or whatever you want, really. That's self-explanatory. Open existing file. There you go. There's a bunch of maps that I have. Open recent files. So there's that. Toggle map file is favorite, which I've never done. Not because I don't know how, just because I've never needed to use it, because I just have like a recent levels thing right there, and it'll store up to 10. I've only got like 8 maps, so I haven't even reached the limit yet. You save current level, all levels, and all writable packages, which we'll get into when we talk about the content browser. So there's those 3 save options. Undo, redo, of course, and here is like your kind of like selection toolbar thingy-majigger. Your translation widget is what it's on right now. That allows you to basically just move items. You can just drag, and move, and that's kind of self-explanatory. Pretty easy to figure out. You just drag in the appropriate direction, and you can, move objects around. If I hit the space button, it'll toggle through 3 things, and you can also click them up here respectively. This one, of course, is rotating in 3 directions and scaling it in 3 directions, though technically if you scale in any one of these directions, it will actually just scale all of it because it's scaling in a uniform way, which that's important to note if you have textures, because if you scale non-uniformly, then the texture will scale non-uniformly. And sometimes you can get textures to mess up, doing that. So it defaults to uniform scaling so that you don't get textures being messed up, which is nice. But if you click on this, you can select things, but you can't actually get anything that allows you to interact with that object besides editing the properties. I can still hit F4 and open up the properties menu on the objects that I select. But it's a good way to, just edit properties without having to have, this big translation widget in the way, which now it looks as if it's really not that big, and if I get closer to it, it'll just kind of get smaller. But you have to imagine if you're working with really tiny objects, because this box is about as tall as the player. So if you want like really small objects, like little flowers and things, you have to imagine that it can kind of get annoying sometimes, and this will end up getting in your way. So this tool is useless at times. So keep that in mind. And you have non-uniform scaling as well if you wanted to, scale non-uniformly. But again, keep in mind that it won't scale the texture uniformly. So you want to be careful when using this. And then you can always switch back to uniform scaling and then scale it uniform from the current section that it's in. So now I can actually scale this uniformly even though it's stretched out in one direction. So that's cool. Now, you have local and world coordinate planing. And I'm going to have to kind of move some of these objects around real quick to kind of demonstrate this. Mostly it comes into play when you've rotated objects. Alright, so I'm going to rotate this just at an odd angle. 45 degrees is fine. Now if I switch to local, notice right now it's maintaining its current position regardless of how I move this object. And it'll be the same exact position on this one. Any object I select will have the same orientation. Okay, where's this object's thingy-majigger? I don't know. Oh, there it is. See, that one's the same orientation. Now, if I select this and switch to local, it flips and orients itself with the object. So that's what's important about this, is that if you're in local, it'll orient itself with the object. If you're in world time, it'll be the exact same coordinate moving system with everything that you're working with, and it'll orient itself with the world. Now, local can be useful in and of itself because basically it will allow you to move along this object's own axis. So if I were to go in this direction, it actually moves it diagonally instead of what it would be like in world time, which would just be moving it straight up. So this object's z-axis is actually this way instead of up and down. So it's useful at times, but can be a little bit annoying if it switches and you don't realize it and you just start moving an object and it's doing wonky things, because sometimes it can just be doing wonky things. That happens. So just be aware that that is there, and sometimes it'll switch to local and you can just hit world. World is a good uniform just to make sure that everything is being moved the same, and you don't have weird things happening where weird things shouldn't be happening. Now you have your Find the Actors button right here, of course, that does the same thing as the Edit Find Actors button there. Content Browser, of course, Open Unreal Kismet, and Open Unreal Matinee, which, as you've seen, are all buttons. And you've got the Unreal Kismet, Unreal Matinee right there. So now this is very useful for lag. Basically allows you to set the distance that the editor will just stop rendering things. This isn't affecting what it'll look like in the end at all. Basically, everything else is still there. Like all this other stuff out here, mostly just the skybox, is still there. It's just not rendering it for the editor. It's just telling the editor, don't worry about rendering that. But if I were to jump in game, it's still there. So this is not like, at first I was kind of afraid, whenever I first started using this, I was afraid I was going to be messing something up by doing this. But it's great if you're experiencing a lot of lag, because it literally will cut down on some lag sometimes. Sometimes, okay, not all the time. But it will cut down on a bit of just graphical lag that will allow you to really be able to kind of just focus on a certain area. And see, all the lighting and everything else is still here, even though you can't see the source of the lighting. And by the way, it is in a circle, not just like a line. So keep that in mind. But it's more of a sphere, really. But anyway, so like you can work on like certain sections and all the lighting and everything else still be there. It's still calculating everything else. It's just stopping the graphical lagging from beyond this point. So you have this blurring effect way off here that you can't really understand unless you get the full picture. So there. Now, this next option is about translucent selections. So I'm going to have to do something real quick to be able to demonstrate this. Static meshes. Is this the one I want? No, wait. Yeah, that works. Okay. Let me just drag this out here and rotate it 90 degrees. And move you down. So notice that I am using world so that I can move these the same. But anyway, it's not relevant right now. Translucent selection is useful and then not useful. It depends on what you're doing exactly. If I have it on, I can select this glass. If I have it off, I'll click behind the glass. And no matter where I click, I cannot actually select this glass. I have to go and manually select it in here. And I'll get to this. Don't worry. But I can click, this. And now I've selected the glass. And I can do stuff with it. Basically, this is useful if you're working with a lot of glass stuff, so that you don't have to constantly be selecting the glass itself. Because, like, sometimes you won't even know that the glass is really there. Like, I mean, you can tell this is here because it's stained, but in some, in certain sections, the glass is, pretty see-through. So, like right here, but, and it doesn't select it. But if I had this on, it still selects the glass from right there. So I would be thinking I'm clicking somewhere, and then it selects the glass. So that can sometimes get annoying. This works on pretty much all translucent materials and objects, like water. So if you're making a coral reef of some kind, then this would be really handy, because otherwise you would have to actually go underwater to work on it instead of working on it, from above the water. And I mean, and I know that's well, obviously you need to be underwater to see it, but sometimes, even then you would still be selecting the water while underwater. So, this can be a very useful thing to turn on and turn off, depending on what you need it for. So, just remember that that's there. And I usually just keep it on for what I'm currently working on. I don't need to. I don't have a lot of glass, so whenever I do work with glass, I'm needing to select it and move it around, and it doesn't become a problem for me. But again, I'm not working with a lot of glass in my level. This I've never really used, so I don't really know. I see the tooltip, but I've never seen an area where there's a selection box. I don't even know how to do a selection box. So apologies for that one. Yeah, I don't even know what that does either. Some of the stuff I've tried to look up, and I have not found anything. I guess it may have something to do with your favorites, but I don't know. Now, all of this is, of course, for building things. Building your lighting, your paths, your AIs, everything. You can all do it from this menu. This is, of course, your geometry, lighting, paths, cover nodes, build all. You've got your various options here. And I'll get more into exactly how the building works. In short, it allows the editor to actually sit down, process what is going on, and give you a more realistic feedback. And I can show you a quick example of what I mean. You can see the shadow right here of the object, and it's updating fairly okay. Let me see. let me make another one of these. Oh, that's not really gonna do right. It's not quite what I was wanting. At the start of this, yeah, actually, you know what? Let's do this. I can show you what I mean here. No, don't save. Okay. All right. So notice how there's a shadow already here and everything. Now, if I move this, the shadow right here doesn't change. That's because it's already hard-coded into the level. This is giving me a preview of this shadow. This shadow was like better designed, and it's already hard-coded into the level. So we'd have to rebuild the level to get rid of this. This is giving me an update kind of preview of the lighting, but in a lot of cases, in this sort of environment, it's not so much. But in a lot of cases where you're working with lighting in a room, there's going to be a big difference between the preview and the final result, because the preview just kind of shows, just like lightens and darkens areas. The way the light works in UDK, the light will like bounce around and change colors a little bit, and as it works in real life. So, you can use this stuff to build things, and the geometry I'll get into, like I said, in the CSG tutorials and stuff, and all that. Now, you have your lighting quality, production. Like, you really don't want to do that too much unless you want to get like a really good idea of what everything looks like, because that will take a while. Trust me, it will take a while. With small levels, not really that long, but I've been working on a larger level, and I did the lighting, and the lighting alone took like some 8 hours to complete. And the level itself is not huge. It's not really all that big. And it took like 8 hours. So just know that this will add up pretty quick for the lighting quality. And you can just click it in addition to right-clicking and doing that menu. And you have your full screen option here, of course, which just does that, as we saw. Toggle real-time audio, and adjust your volume by clicking. That's up to you or not. It can be good to kind of get an idea of what your audio sounds like as you're working with the level. But if you have some like constant ambient noise in the background, like wind or something, it can get annoying kind of quickly. I've had experience with that. Anyway, this is all your mobile build and run features, and I've never messed with any of it, so I don't know what any of it does. This, though, start your level, of course, on a PC, like it says. That's self-explanatory tooltip. Kismet debugging is what that is, and this just allows you to play it, and it just opens it up in the window, and there you go. Now notice, it even has a shadow in here, and it's telling me that my lighting, of course, needs to be rebuilt. And it's actually not updating the shadow for this one either. Even though it was updating it in the editor window, it's not actually taking it in this case. So there's another reason you have to rebuild things. Now, there's this one, but there's also this option here that you can play in viewport, and you can actually play the level in here. So it's up to you what you want to do. I sometimes do both, and the advantage to this sometimes is that you will actually spawn in the spawn point, which is here. You'll spawn in the spawn point by clicking this one, and with this one you'll just drop from wherever you currently are. So if you wanted to get to a certain place in your level and test just one specific section without having to go, through like 5 minutes of cinematic sequences and like, I don't know, like if you're like fighting and whatever to get to a certain section in your level, then you can just like go to that certain section and just hit this button and you just drop in, and it'll start up everything like you were normally going to be starting from the beginning. You'll just be starting wherever you currently are. And a lot of the time levels work based off of player position, and sometimes accomplish tasks. But you can. I'll get all into that in a minute. But you can traverse vast distances and then hit this button to make your player not have to walk for several hours. Now the tear off floating copy. I said I was going to get to that. This is cool. UDK is really good with working with multiple monitors. So you can hit that button, and this is not like something that will update with this one. This is completely independent of each other. These are completely independent of each other. So you could stick this on another monitor to get like a different view of something. And I have two monitors, so I do this, but I can't show you both monitors at the same time, obviously. But that is useful to get like a different view of something. So you can do that, and you could do floating monitors of each of these as well. So I could do a floating monitor of this. Do note, however, the orthographic views all update with each other. So you have to remember that, and you can maximize this, of course, naturally. But just remember that these do update with each other. I wish they didn't, but I don't know how to lock it. There's a lock button here, but it doesn't really do anything. I can click that. Oh, well, see, it still updates, though. No, it's not. Oh, it's finally working now. Okay. Wasn't working for a long time, but there you go. So you can lock it, and then it won't update unless you actually go in here. We'll update all these others, but you can move this independently. So anyway, there's that. And of course you can change the settings just like anything else. But onwards to other things. Your mouse movement speed. You can just click it like the lighting, or you can right click and select a speed. And self-explanatory, it just increases your mouse movement speed. So this is the slowest. This is a little faster, and now we're just zooming all over the place. And you can get some distance with the fastest, usually pretty quick. And I, use all of these and a variety of all in between. Well, not in between, but like I use a variety of all these different things, depending on what I'm doing. So now this just works with post-processing. You can toggle on and off the previews of that, and I'll get into post-processing later on, and you can see that. And you can, level streaming volume previews. That's what previous stands for, is previews. Lock selected actors to camera. Essentially meaning that, hang on. There. Okay, now what's happened? I forgot to click on the object. It can be a little complicated, but if I click that button and then click on something, I've actually moved my camera into this object, and I'm moving the physical object around. I actually am moving the physical object around, because if I click this to get out, I've now moved that into midair. So you can do some interesting things with object positioning like that if you want to, where you can just click this and then click something, and you go into that object and become that object. Your camera moves to it. Now the original camera stays behind, but whenever you unclick it, your camera kind of just snaps automatically to wherever you were. But you can move, you can move objects by kind of controlling them yourself if you want to do it that way. This toggles game mode. You can see the difference there. That is kind of a big difference. And that, that's up to you what you want to work with. But again, you can't see a lot of the important things like your lighting, your spawn point, and things like that. So you usually just want to leave this off, unless you want to get a good look of your level. Now I'm going to actually go from left to right on this, just because that's the way I've always done it. But your brush wireframe, we're currently in lit mode. Your brush wireframe reduces everything, to this typical you're working with a video game kind of view thing. And there's a difference between brush wireframe and wireframe, which you'll see more so in the CGS tutorial that I'll be doing. And it'll be kind of hard to explain now because I have to do a bunch of setup stuff that I really just don't feel like doing right now. Now you can't see, you can't see a difference now, but like I said, I can show you a difference in the CGS stuff in the other tutorial. Unlit, it looks terrible with this because there is a lot of lighting effects going on. But in unlit mode, it's basically like there is a lighting, but in the same sense there isn't a lighting. So there's like no shadows and stuff. And in some cases like this, where it kind of relies off of lighting to create the texture, it kind of screws up the texture. But it's good for working in places that are really, really dark. Really, that's kind of it. Or unless you're working with like something that's really, really bright, it kind of just evens out so that you can see everything and it kind of just be normalized, sort of normalized, I guess, and you can see things. So this is lit mode. So it's pretty bright, you know, and then it kind of lowers the brightness all around, and you can work with things. And there's no shadows anywhere. It's a uniform lighting. So this is very good, you know, like I said, for working in really bright areas and really dark areas. Otherwise, it's kind of useless. You know, your lit mode typically is what we're in most of the time. Now, your detail lighting, of course, just shows like specifically where the light is coming from. So there's a lot of lighting going on over in this direction. And if we switch back to lit mode, you can see that that is the case. Over here, there is light, but there is a lot of bloom effect going on right over here. So there's a lot of light coming from over here, so from your detail lighting. And again, I don't really use a lot of these special modes a lot. This is, you know, for people who are you know, just want to use it and learn how to use it. I don't really use really much of this other stuff. You've got like just lighting to look at as well if you wanted to have a just lighting thing. Now, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say this now. Some of these we're fixing to get it to be kind of like really intrusive on the eyes. So just be careful looking at your screen. Your lighting complexity. I'm gonna get out of this real quick. I don't use the lighting complexity because that just hurts my eyes. Texture density, and you can't see anything in this because there's, I guess, just no texture density. Shader complexity, so you know, shows that. And then a lot of this is for debugging. In all honesty, it's not used to be used like on a normal basis. It's just, a lot of it's just debugging stuff that I don't use personally. Okay, light map density, and I'm not going to mess with this too much because it will hurt your eyes, but you know, you can play around with that if you want to. And then, of course, lighting only with texture density, I think, is what it's supposed to be. So, and we can go back to unlit mode. So those are all the different forms. Now, there is the real-time thing, which if I uncheck this, notice the sky's not moving in the background. And it won't, like, update, if you have, like, wind effects, it won't be updating the wind effects, and various other things that would happen, you know, in real time. That's self-explanatory. And do note that if you want some of this stuff, like, if I were to move this object right here, I'm going to uncheck real time. I'm going to move this. And now it actually pops over. So it doesn't move with this, it just pops. Okay, and notice the sky is moving in the background because it's supposed to be. So every time this updates, that's when that's going to move and when this is going to move. So if you wanted that to happen all the time, you could just have this. And now it's actually going to slide along as we move this. And the same goes for these menus as well. It works the same way. So some of these you can have, you know, on if you wanted to. And I can move this up. Actually, no, let me do in this one. So the bottom one is not actually moving because that's a top view. And because I'm moving it up, you're not going to see a difference in the top. If I move it this way, now you can see that's updating real time. This one, you know, is not updating real time at all because I don't have that selected. So that's how that works. And you can change the view mode by just clicking and going through these. Pretty simple, really. You could do, you know, you could do two perspective views if you wanted to have that. That's up to you, how you want to do it. And I mean, you can have a perspective, orthographic view like I have here, but just know you're going to have this grid thing. So usually you want to keep that on like a wireframe thing. That's what typically people do. But moving on to the different modes. Normally you are in camera mode. If you go into geometry mode, you will be working with CSG brushes. This does not work on static meshes at all whatsoever. No. This is only going to work on your CSG brushes. And we'll cover this in like the next tutorial. A lot of stuff going on in the next tutorial. But anyway, it'll be fun. So this is your geometry tool. Terrain tool, not even going to get into that. In this tutorial, there's going to be a terrain tutorial for that. Texture alignment mode, I don't know how that works, really. I'm going to be frank with you, I don't know how it works. I've never used it for anything either. Mesh paint mode, I looked up how it worked because I was curious, and it's complicated. And it inquires stuff that I'm not good with, which is doing textures in UDK, like actually making materials, and I'm not too good with that yet. And you have to do that, like make a materials in special ways and do fancy things and stuff that are confusing. So I'm not going to be covering this either, unless like by some miracle I figure out how to do it without being completely confused on camera. Static mesh mode, I've never gotten really this to work too well. I don't know what it's for, because all this stuff you can access through the properties menu and you have more options. So landscape mode, again, I don't understand what this is for either, because I've played around with this and not gotten it to really do much. Now the foliage mode does work. I know how to use this, though I prefer not to, because you can accidentally really cause some pain and really mess up your world with lag, like terrible, if you kind of abuse this too much. So I typically just do stuff by hand. Now we move on to our different brushes. Now if we go over here and we can see this little red box, this is called the builder brush, and these different shapes are what affect it, and you can right click on it as well. If you wanted to right click on the cone, you could make this like hollow or something. So now we have a hollow cone. Notice the difference there. So we've got like a difference going on. Align to side, all this kind of stuff that you can kind of adjust the sizes, and you've got all kinds of things that you can select here. And I'll get more into all this, like I said, in the next tutorial. You can add, subtract, intersect, de-intersect various CSG here. And this builder brush can also use to place volumes or special brushes, portal, invisible, two-sided, things of that nature, and also your volumes. So you can do post-processing volumes, or a portal volume, or a physics volume, or something like that here with this as well. And you can do them in these shapes. Whatever the shape this is in is the shape that this will be in. But you just want to make sure that you are aware of your triangles as well. Now, these are of course select options, so show selected only, hide selected, show all, all that kind of stuff that we covered, in the view thing. It was here somewhere. Yeah, right here, edit. So that's all right here as well. And that's invert selection. So you can go to an actor, which doesn't really make much sense to me, because you would have to specify an actor, and there's really no way to do that, so I don't know if that's working right. But go to Builder Brush Works. So if I go over here, I can click this, and bam, I'm here. So that's how that works. And by the way, it actually I'm sorry. It won't rotate the camera, it just moves the camera. So note, if I actually turn this around, it's going to just move behind the object, like that, instead of rotating the camera around. So, that's just a neat little fact. Alright, now to this bottom section, because we're just about done. Alright, first off, you have a blank menu that doesn't actually do anything whatsoever. Then you have random buttons down here, just like little warning things, and they will change depending on what's going on. You can just click it, and it'll bring up a menu of things that you can do. The menu also will crash. But there you go. You got Perforce if you wanted to log into that or something, and various other options that you just click on it and it does things. I know my recording thing's in the way. It shows your current level, what you currently have selected, of course. Gives you a little extra data on it. So I've got 18 triangles, 26 vertices, 0 sections. So you can kind of see how that what that is. And this is of course my scaling. If I click on this object, if I want to scale this up like by 10 times, I can type up a 10 in here, and now it's scaled up 10 times. The first number is your uniform scaling, and it shows this. It shows just draw scale. Is it what it is? And this is uniform. So it's not going to affect these other numbers, but it's actually going to scale this up in every direction by whatever number you've put in here. And you can independently affect different directions. So this is your X, this is your Y, and this is your Z. Now notice that if I go to scaling mode, those numbers actually go up. So you can see the numbers as they go up and what they look like. And then you can go in here and you can change it. So if I just wanted this to be 1 or like 2, bam, it changed it. And it'll do it kind of a little bit on both sides as well. So it did it on both sides, as you can see, because now that's like up above the ground and it wasn't before. So, that's kind of how that works. And you can, this is very useful if you want to get really precise with some of your placements to make sure that, they go down to the right decimal numbers. Because you can go out to like 4 decimals, and that's pretty good margin of being able to get things really precise and close. So that's cool. Now, you have your grid snapping. So 16 is kind of like a semi-standard grid snapping, but notice like I can drag this a little bit before it actually snaps, so it's snapping every 16 grids. And if I go out to the orthographic view, it'll actually look a little different now. If I set this to like 1024, those are the grid sizes. Each one of these is a grid, so I would have to drag this, and it would just only snap in these few spots. Now if I set this to like 2, notice the grids are much smaller per section for every time it snaps. So that's just kind of up to you, and you can actually just completely disable this entirely if you wanted to, which is I think pretty much similar to just setting it to 1, but it's a checkbox that you can click. And the same thing for the angle. The angles, the rotational grid. It's the exact same thing as this grid. This is of course the scaling, so you can do your percentage scaling through there. Now your autosave options are here. You can choose your package types to save, just autosave maps or autosave content packages, and your interval. Now I would make sure this is kind of long, but at the same time pretty short, because if it's too short, whenever it is saving, it kind of pauses everything that you're doing, saves the map, and then allows you to continue. So if you did it every minute, on a small map like this, you won't be able to notice anything. But on bigger maps, sometimes it can take like a minute to save everything. And if you have it every minute, then it would be constantly saving. And you would never really be doing anything, though it would still be constantly saving. And all the autosaves, they save like 10 of them, and then they delete one and then resave over it. So it is not just overwriting, it is actually saving separate things so that you can have like autosaves plenty backed up. So, just keep that in mind when you're setting your autosave. Though, do make sure that you have an autosave and that it is enabled down here with the green checkbox. And of course, it shows how long until the next one. But do make sure that you have it, because sometimes UDK just wants to be a little unstable and crash on you. But yes, that is my spiel on the movement, the GUI kind of stuff. Hopefully I have done okay. If you have feedback, it is much appreciated. I do read as many comments as I can, because of I wouldn't guarantee I could read all the comments, but because I had to set this up with not my main email, sometimes I forget to check it. So, but do leave a comment, and I will certainly take your feedback into account when I'm making another video. And heck, I mean, I may even re-upload this one because I've tried to record this exact episode a couple times now. But yeah, let me know, what you think and ideas for, future tutorials. I have plenty already in mind, but ideas are always helpful. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in another video.